Before we start talking about Pronto, I'm just wondering, did you consider just sort of leaving your whole pursuit of AVs behind and just kind of walking away from the whole thing?
There's a lot of problems out there that needed some solving. However, I like to finish things to a fault, I would say. So in doing the self-driving motorcycle, we had a hard time getting working the first year, and then you would think I would learn and be like, okay, everybody's doing cars, but I felt like I really needed to make it work so that we can showcase and finish it. So I like finishing things. I think self-driving cars and trucks haven't really started yet, so it'd be too early to move on to something else. But I would say, after leaving Uber, I spent many nights wandering the streets of Berkeley thinking through what's next and why it hasn't really happened yet, right? It's been 10 years since, I built a Prius that delivered a pizza from San Francisco to Treasure Island, completely unmanned. And today, there are no unmanned vehicles that are driving in California. It looked like it was really close back then. It feels like it's really close now. It might be another 10 years before it actually happens on a big commercial scale. So that's why with Pronto, we're trying something very different, which is how do we build technology that can ship now and add safety and real benefits today.
When you were walking the streets of Berkeley at night, thinking about what you wanted to do, I mean, did you kind of go through that period where you were thinking about some of your biggest mistakes? I mean, what did you, and I'm sure you did, so what did you conclude during that sort of soul-searching time?
Sure. So you can think of a lot of things on these walks, and I would say, I've learned, I didn't get everything right in the past, and so I've looked at what things were wrong both on the approach and what things were wrong, technically. So I would say, I've earned this reputation of being difficult to work with, partially, I think, because I expect a lot out of myself and out of my team, but that's very different than being reckless. And I think that, I stand behind my safety record on that. But some of the things that you can reflect on are, there's a belief that a huge scale of vehicles is helpful because you can drive more miles and get more data and learn automatically. Unfortunately, the technology is not there today to learn from unstructured data. And so what really matters is high quality miles that allow your software to go forward. And I think Sterling Anderson talked about that earlier. I think Aurora is doing phenomenal work on that as well. So that's one. Second, I think the whole approach that people are taking of going straight to level 4, I think is flawed. It's difficult to get to the point where you can go from it wasn't safe enough yesterday and today it is. What's that trigger that happens in there? So I think an evolutionary standpoint of getting technology to be better and better over time is actually very practical and helpful, and that's what we're pursuing.
Well, that's interesting to me because you have this new company, and as you mentioned, you're not going straight to level 4. And for those in the audience who don't know what level 4 means, it's essentially full automation. And instead, you're taking what maybe 2 years ago would have been considered super boring, which is ADAS, an advanced ADAS.
It is super boring. That's why it's going to work.
And I'm just wondering, does your pursuit of this level 2 negate essentially what you worked on for an entire decade? Or do you see Pronto being a stepping stone in terms of level 2 and eventually getting to level 4?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that what we're doing now is the culmination of all the lessons that we've learned, in the past. So to me, the reason for doing level 2, which is basically, for people here, it's basically, it keeps your car or truck centered in the lane and, driving at a safe speed, but it still requires the person to be responsible for what the car is doing. The reason why we're doing that on trucks, on highways, because, luxury cars have these features. Tesla has an amazing autopilot. Daimler has a great one as well, for Mercedes and so forth. So there's a bunch of players that have it. But on trucks, there's zero. None of them have this offering. And yet trucks drive more miles than cars. This is your job of driving 10 hours a day. and they cause more, fatalities because they're 80,000 pounds, and when they have an accident, it's a bigger deal. And so think of it, if it helps you on your way to work, and you're more relaxed when you get to work, imagine if your work was driving for 10 hours, you could be more relaxed at the end of the day there, which would mean that you would be fresher the next day, or you would be even like at the last hour of driving, you'd be safer because you're more alert and you're more paying attention. The reason why I think it's been overlooked is the trucks are, honestly, maybe 1 or 2 generations behind where the cars are. So there are no trucks that have electric power steering. There are no trucks that have redundant braking. And so it's a harder point to jump into than outfitting a car.
Well, you made a good point, which is that trucks don't have some of the electronic components that passenger cars. So can I surmise then that Pronto is going to be building hardware, meaning a drive-by-wire kit that would, so with trucks, you normally when you do the steering wheel, there's a steering column that it's attached to. So in order to do ADAS, you would think that you would need electronic control. So are you developing that? Are you doing hardware in-house as part of
Yeah,
the
correct.
company?
So we're really focused on the customer and what it is that we can do to provide value to them. And right now what we're providing value is helping them be more relaxed and safer while driving. And so to do that, we obviously have to apply some force to the steering. And trucks right now only have a hydraulic power steering, so we've had to build our own electric assist in there. We've partnered with a manufacturer of these technologies to help work with us on doing that. So we're not manufacturing the technology ourselves, but we've designed it, and they've built it to our specs. And the reason why that's important is because I see Pronto as purely a software company, where all of the hardware, we want to have the existing player in the tool chain that knows how to do this, or in the supply chain, so that you have the same people that make the power steering can make the electric power steering. The same people that make the brakes can make the better version of the brake. Because, frankly, they're better at making that stuff than I will ever be. What we can do is we can focus on what's important and where we can differentiate. So we can bring the intelligence into the vehicle to make it where the vehicle now drives safer because it's helping you along the way.
So speaking of hardware, though, you are known for your work on LiDAR, and yet Pronto is not going to be using LiDAR, and I'm wondering why. Is it because of, are you just staying away from it because of the Waymo Uber lawsuit, or is there some other reason why LiDAR is not in the picture with Pronto?
Yes, really good. So that's a great question, too. So I would say, so I don't have any restrictions on not doing LiDAR, but I do have a restriction personally of not doing things that I know aren't going to work. In the past, I understood, I could see what we were doing, and basically back in 2009 or 10, you could see that the LiDARs didn't have the performance for what you needed because you couldn't see far enough to actually safely have the system react to the software, safely have the system see what's going on to have a correct reaction. It turns out that even with LiDAR, what's missing today is not seeing more accurately or seeing further. What's missing is understanding what is happening to those vehicles around you and being able to predict what the motion is so that you can react accordingly and be safe. And not just predict what their motion is going to be, but what they think you're going to be doing. And so we mainly focus on that because that's the building block that is unlocking the future. Now, I'll say I was a huge proponent of LiDAR, and
it was the sauce, right?
Well, that was not my quote, but I definitely believed that was actually the unlocking factor. A wiser person than me, and I'll eat some humble pie here, said that LiDAR is a crutch.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about that.
Yep.
So you would agree with Elon Musk, he said, and he's been ridiculed for that a bit.
He's right.
For calling LiDAR a crutch, and that's what you believe as well.
I believe that as well. And I don't believe that because I can't do it, because I'm happy to do that. It's just not where I think the actual value is coming from. And you could look at that, right? So if you were to analyze all the disengages that people have done and try to break it down, what's the actual real reason behind that? Is the real reason because the brakes weren't redundant or the steering wasn't redundant. Nope, in fact, that's like 0.0% of all disengages are because there was no fail operational system. All of them are software failure, and they're mainly a software failure on mature companies at trying to understand what the vehicle is going to be doing, or the pedestrians around you, and you having a misunderstanding or miscommunication with them. And so that's where the value is going to be. Now, we could have this conversation in a couple of years and be like, that wasn't the problem. The problem is this other new thing that we don't know about. But like all scientific process, you make a hypothesis, you test it, and you're wrong, and then you move on. Like before Galileo, we used to think that the Earth was the center, and the sun went around us, and then he realized it was opposite. That was a major discovery back then, and they were like, oh, this whole like Inquisition and all kinds of things that can relate to you a little bit about that. And so, I would say, going forward, I'm all about finding where the problem is and solving that. And right now, the problem is not better lasers. The problem is prediction.
It's interesting because you talk about the willingness to discard things that don't work, and yet you really did work on a single premise for a decade or so. And I'm wondering if, this is going to sound crazy, but was the lawsuit and everything that happened sort of a blessing? Did it cause you to rethink things, or were you already starting to rethink that maybe this level 4 first approach isn't the way to go?
Yeah, so I would think that it's hard, once you're in the middle of something and you're like dedicated fully to it, it's very difficult to get perspective and see like, you think you're there, but actually you're missing this other path that's gonna block you completely. So I definitely would say that taking a step back and taking some time to reflect on my life and things I could do better and where
you started a church? Yeah,
well, that's not when the church was started, but that's that was while I was at Google in 2015. But to think about really what is the actual problem and be able to start from a clean slate is very difficult to do at a company, specifically when you're dealing with the day-to-day about like this team and that team don't get along and all kinds of other problems. At that point, it's very difficult to like really set the strategy of what you need to do. You just focus on executing along that path. So we'll know if it was a blessing in disguise or not, but I think I'm pretty hopeful about the future, and I'm optimistic about what we're doing.
So while you have now pursuing Pronto, there's dozens of companies that are still pursuing this level 4, and I'm just wondering, in your view now, and I wonder how they would respond to this, but they're not on stage, so we can't ask them. But do you no longer believe that level 4 is achievable safely in the short term?
Well, so what I would say is I encourage people to have different approaches because I could totally be wrong. And so it's great that other people have different points of views. And what I would say is like the true metric for when AVs actually get to be deployed is safety, right? So safety is the only metric that determines when an AV will come out, not whether they use LiDAR or not, or car maker or software vendor. And so I don't personally think that straight to level 4 is going to be something that is doable, because you'll need to have a very long time before you actually solve the problems. And by providing technology that evolves and gets better over time, you'll be able to like chip away at all the problems. People use an example of if you're going to the moon, building a ladder doesn't really help you. Well, the thing is that we're not going to the moon. We're just trying to drive to the corner store and back. And so we shouldn't be building, that's an analogy that while you should be building the right technology with the right strategy, it's not necessarily that you can't make an evolutionary step to get there. And I think that the evolutionary step will uncover a lot of lessons learned that will make it safer and better. If somebody in a kid in a garage somewhere has a great idea on how to go to level 4 directly, I encourage them to do that. That's fantastic. My view is that we can deliver safety. What we're doing at Pronto right now is we're building something which is called Copilot, which goes on a truck and delivers direct safety benefits to drivers today. And let's get that. Let's improve the system in the world that we live in that much. And then from there, maybe it will evolve to level 4, maybe it won't.
ADAS, though, is oftentimes not viewed as something that increases safety, though. It's viewed as a convenience that improves the comfort of driving. So are you flipping the script a bit and And do you believe that ADAS, so advanced driver assistance systems, can actually make people safer? Because that would be conflicting with what some others in the industry say.
For sure. And ADAS is a category of just saying computers helping you driving. So there's a plethora of different flavors of that, from it gives you a little beep beep when you're too close to the car in front of you, to it actually controls and drives the car well for you, or the truck well for you. So I think the statistics actually show something different, which is that ADAS features overall have reduced the frequency and severity of crashes. The problem is when somebody's using it to drive to work, that's not their job. They may want to send some emails or watch some YouTube or Hulu or whatever. And so as they are doing that, they're taking this new technology and they're trading it off for, I can do something else right now. And the way we prevent this behavior is we try to are they touching the steering wheel? Is their hand on the steering wheel? Well, you can have one hand on the steering wheel and the other hand can be, texting or something like that. There's plenty of people that are really good at texting. So the key value is, where's the attention? Where are you looking and what are you doing? And so we have built a driver monitoring system that ensures that the driver is monitoring the road. It's not foolproof, but we think one of the best in class. And we think that coupled with watching the road and paying attention, the strain of driving for 11 hours straight is less with this technology. And so it's not so much that you're preventing this accident or that accident. You're just saying, on average, the driver is less physically tired and is concentrating on supervising the world as opposed to physically driving it anywhere. So it's about reducing the fatigue while minimizing the additional distractions. I'll say one more quick thing. So on trucks, you have a professional driver, which is different than a gadget enthusiast that might buy a brand new car and be like, this is awesome, I can just watch
do whatever I want.
Correct.
Well, the complacency issue is an issue with passenger cars, and it's been something that's been noted sometimes with Teslas, and we've all seen YouTube videos of crazy stuff going on there. So is the driver monitor system, what is your approach to that? Because there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can do eye tracking, which is one product that's out there. But when we were talking earlier, you mentioned something that I hadn't thought about, which is truck drivers wear sunglasses a lot. So how are you making this more foolproof? What's the approach?
Well, the approach for us is we actually do a couple other things besides that. So we track the skeleton and the face of the vehicle, what they're looking at, as well as the eyes. But people wear sunglasses, and the eye tracking does not work past that. So we want to rely not just on that, but we also look at, when the camera, is the person holding a cell phone? And so this is, we think, something very new. There's some research going on in some universities that do that. And we think that's actually very important, because if you're not holding your phone and your hands are near the steering wheel or on the steering wheel, you're probably paying attention, because it's not that interesting to just do something else. So the goal for us is, we want to make the driver monitoring not as a policing of the driver, but as something to help them stay safe while they're still driving. Now, the goal is not to make it where it's foolproof and you're just policing them, you look down for 3 seconds and then we shock the seat or something like that. The goal is really to be able to make it something where they know they're being monitored, they know that it's driving, and when something is happening, we ask their attention to be higher. So some of the things that we're doing that's pretty innovative is, if you're in traffic, you need to be looking much more than if the perception system is realizing it's on the highway and you're in the middle of Nebraska and there's nobody in front of you, and there's nobody anywhere within a mile of you. You can look away for more seconds than you would normally in traffic.
So have you talked to truck drivers about this? Because there are going to be probably some who think this is a great benefit and it's going to make it more comfortable for them and reduce fatigue. And there's possibly others who aren't going to want to be monitored. And what is the feedback that you're getting from carriers and truck drivers? Or are you even talking to them yet?
Yeah, so we've received a number of pre-orders and orders from these fleets. And so part of going there is actually having these discussions with them about it. And the main thing is, people don't like being filmed on the job. It's just a normal thing. cameras are banned in cockpits of airplanes. I don't know why. It seems like they should be there if they're recording everything else. And where the industry is going is that all the drivers are being monitored for how often they drive. And as a result of doing that, the capacity of the trucking industry has dropped 15%. So that's how much like illegal cheating was happening before, at least. But basically, cameras are going in every single truck at some point because that's the future. There's no reason why not to do that. There's the person's paid for their job. The turnover is super high, and the risk of getting in an accident is there. So the question now becomes, given that it's going there, are you going to get something in return? So if you're going to get a camera on you, you might as well get a system that helps you drive on the highway and makes your job more pleasant.
You've brought up safety a few times, and I'm curious about what your specific approach to safety is. And there was a post that was put out today by your new Chief Safety Officer, Robbie Miller, who came from Uber and is sort of known for the guy who sent the email to Uber warning them of some safety risks. But I wonder, warranted or not, there is a perception out there that you mentioned this, that you have this like reckless reputation or the rebel. And so I wonder, why should we trust your safety record? Why should we listen to what you're saying is going to be this safety focus?
Well, there's a couple facets to the answer to that. The first off is, we were very fortunate to hire, what I believe is the world leading expert in AV safety, Robbie Miller. So thanks for mentioning that. So there's somebody watching what I'm doing, if that makes you feel any better. And in my mind, he's the best, and he's shown that he's done the right things when it mattered and issued the right warnings. But second is that we just understand what we're building is the technology it's effectively, we're building a safety tool. And so without that, it is not, there's nothing to the company, there's no interesting product. And so what we're focusing on is not building many vehicles or driving millions of miles. What we're focusing on is showing the technology provides a value, not just to the driver in terms of making it more comfortable, but also on performance and minimizing the accidents. Level 2 systems are clearly less valuable on a per unit deployment than level 4 units because you still have to pay the person that's doing that. So to demonstrate the value, we do need to deliver something that's there and increasing safety by decreasing risk and helping the trucking companies reduce their insurance loads is a big return on investment.
So we're out of time, but I promised someone on Twitter that I would ask this question because
All right.
So what should we do to appease our AI overlords prior to the singularity apocalypse?
It's a phenomenal question. Well, you can sign up for a Udacity course and learn how to do that. I'm sure there's other classes that you can do as well. No, I mean, ultimately, I think it's a funny question, but, progress is inevitable, and, you want to make sure that you help create the progress and understand where that's going, as opposed to deny it or try to cage it up or, say that it's more dangerous than nuclear weapons, and just be fearful. Basically, AI has a huge opportunity to connect us in a way that you couldn't before. And we can build that in a fearful way or in a way that has bias, or we can build that in a way that's going to be helpful for us. So don't be scared is the, 3-letter answer or 3-word answer.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Go Bears.